in this video I'm going to share a complete guide and recipe to making amazing and delicious pita bread. So it's a simple recipe with simple steps and thrilling results. I'm also going to give a bunch of important tips on how to get the maximum puffiness possible out of these pita breads, the full balloon puff that goes through the whole thing. So let's jump straight into the rabbit hole.
Did she say
or
rabbit?
The pita puff hole. Anyway, let's get straight into it. Let's begin with some of the science behind the pita puff. So, during cooking, the outside of the dough gets hit by the heat first. The top and bottom layers solidify and harden. As the entire dough heats up, the moisture in the center starts to evaporate into steam. As the outer layer has already set, this steam is trapped inside the bread and it pushes outwards. This is what causes the pita to inflate in either partial pockets or a full-on balloon puff. Both cases will result in delicious soft pitas. However, the full-on puff one is preferred because it has a hollow interior that separates easily and you can stuff. To get the full pocket, it's a little bit tricky. Here are some of the most important and helpful tips that I've found. First off, the dough has to be wet enough. It has to have enough water to turn into steam to power the pita puff. Second, the dough has to be very well kneaded. It has to have a strong and elastic gluten network to support the expansion of the bread. Third, we should minimize the formation of cracks and rips in the dough's surface during shaping. These could turn into weak points during cooking later that leak steam, which means less pita volume. Fourth, we need to roll the pitas out thin enough. This will help them puff even more. Fifth, the pan has to be searing hot, really hot. This is to provide an initial burst of heat that turns the water into steam fast. These 5 tips are some of the most important that I've found in getting that balloon-like interior. So it's best to keep them in mind while making this recipe. And a lot of what I say later on will be based on these tips. Of course, even if you don't get a full-on balloon puff, the pitas will still be delicious, and you can always try again. Now for the recipe. The pita dough itself is made of charmingly few ingredients. You'll need a leavening agent. I'm using fruit yeast water, but I have an option listed for instant yeast. If you'd like to find out more about fruit yeast water, then you can check the video link in the description box or up here, somewhere here. And then we have bread flour. Some recipes like to use all-purpose flour, but I like using bread flour for its strong gluten structure. For the liquids, we have water and olive oil. The oil is what makes the pita bread softer and easier to eat. This is extra virgin olive oil, which I strongly recommend because of its alluring fruity aroma. I think the slightest hint of olive oil in the resulting final taste of the pita bread really makes a big difference, makes it much more savory. And then to further delight our taste buds, we have sugar and salt. There's not much sugar in this recipe, it's just there to enhance the flavor and boost the yeast. To make the dough, we start with making POOLISH. This pre-ferment is going to bring a lot of complex flavor to the dough. It does take a while to make, but it's truly worth it. The taste it brings is delectable, and it adds some gluten structure as well. It's entirely worth its cost and time. Combine in a medium-small bowl 100 grams of bread flour and 100 grams of fruit yeast water. Pour the yeast water in. It might foam up a little on contact with the flour. If you're using instant yeast, then instead of 100 grams of fruit yeast water, use 100 grams of water and 1/4 of a teaspoon of instant yeast. You may want to use warm water to activate the yeast. Then you can just add the bread flour to the activated yeast. Regardless of which yeast you use, we stir well to mix the ingredients together. I like using chopsticks to do this. And I normally do it until I don't see any dry lumps of flour. We cover the bowl well then, can't let it dry out, and we'll leave the poolish to ferment for 12 to 18 hours. In this time, it should mature and rise upwards. You'll know it's done when you see its surface covered in bubbles and slightly concave. It started to fall down after rising. This is when we want to use it. So we'll add the poolish into a mixing bowl. It's obviously important to also scrape out whatever sticks to the bowl with a spatula. Then water goes in after the poolish. Just pour it straight in. It's going to help dissolve the poolish in a bit. After water, it's time for the olive oil to join the party. Again, pouring it in. That golden shade is such a lovely color. Both liquids being in, we're now just going to throw in the sugar and salt. Sugar first, sprinkle it on in. And then salt. Now we stir the mixture to dissolve the poolish and mix everything well. Just move the spatula around here, combine it all well. When it's homogeneous, we'll add the final ingredient, the bread flour, just throwing it all in. From here, to knead and mix the dough, we can use either a stand mixer or knead it by hand. For the stand mixer, you can just pop it in and let the machine do the work. It'll probably finish quicker than doing it by hand, 8 to 10 minutes, and it should be done. I'm going to show you how to knead this one by hand because it's a pretty small amount of dough. The total active hand kneading time should be about 15 minutes, although it may vary for you depending on your strength. Starting with, after all the ingredients are in, we'll mix them together with the spatula just so we can form it to a shaggy mass. Then it's time to turn the dough out onto our work surface. Use a scraper to clean out the bowl, dump it all out, and we'll go in with our hands. At this point, the gluten chains are still in chaos in the dough. It's pretty rough, it's not really homogeneous. We'll do some kneading with a bench scraper to pull back the dough. So one hand pushes the dough forward and the other stays clean with the scraper, cleaning up the surface. This will bring it together more. It is very sticky at this stage, it adheres to your hand. That's perfectly fine. No need to add flour, we just want to keep going. Again, we can use our scraper to clean up the traces of the dough. Eventually, after kneading for around 4 to 5 minutes, the dough will have some gluten develop and it will have become entirely homogeneous. I'll gather up the dough into a lump and I'm going to give it a rest, let it relax for a bit. Cover it and leave it for 30 minutes. After that time's over, we can continue kneading the dough. It should be easier to work with here. It's not as tense as before, and it's a bit less sticky, which is a big bonus. As you can see, it also looks a bit smoother. So we'll just continue to knead the dough. Here the dough is after 10 minutes of kneading, not including our break. This dough is still a bit underdeveloped, however it's cleaning up nicely. As we continue working the dough, it's going to start showing a smoother surface and it'll become much more solid. The gluten is developing very well if you see these things. It's a lot less sticky than when we started, however it does still have a tacky feel and it tends to adhere to the surface. That's alright, resist the urge to add flour. The dough is meant to be this way. It's going to remain slightly sticky and wet. This is because the dough has to have enough water to turn into steam that powers the puff, as I mentioned earlier in the first tip. Just keep going. Aside from kneading, another method we can now use is by taking the dough and slamming it down. Pull back and repeat. This is a great arm workout, stress reliever, and of course an effective method for working the dough. It does require the dough to be a bit more cohesive though. It's been about 15 minutes now of working the dough, and as soon as you see this smooth and supple surface, this is a sign that we've developed enough gluten. We can further test the dough by doing a window pane test on it. So we try to stretch the dough out enough to see light through it. If it can do that, then it's passed the test. If the dough ended up tearing before we could stretch it thin enough, then it still needs a bit more kneading. I'd give another 2 minutes before trying the test again. Like I said in the second tip, this gluten network is what's going to support the pita's inflation, so it needs to be well developed, like it is for this dough. So I'm going to kind of shape the dough and basically form it into a round ball. After that, I'm going to line a bowl with some olive oil, a tablespoon or so, coating the sides well. Then we want to drop the dough into this bowl, getting some olive oil on top of the dough as well. Then we cover the bowl and leave it to bulk ferment until it at least doubles in volume. Left outside, this should take around 4 to 5 hours at my current room temperature of about 25 degrees Celsius. The yeast cannot be rushed, it has to be given time to inflate the dough and create flavorful tastes. After it's doubled, we can either go straight to working on it, or we can put it in the fridge to cold ferment it. As it happens, cold fermentation is the better option. The extra time will make for much tastier pitas. It can also help you schedule making the pitas in advance. So, to do it, after the dough is doubled, you can just put it into the fridge for up to 18 hours, and then when you want to use it, you can take it out, let it come to room temperature for a bit, and then continue on with the video. Okay, after the bulk fermentation, prepare a work surface by dusting it with flour, then flip the bowl onto it. The dough should come right out as long as there was enough olive oil to prevent it from sticking. Succeeding bulk fermentation, our dough should look like this, lovely and airy. We're going to fold this dough into a rectangle now, deflating it along the way. Just by pressing and patting it down, we want to get most of the gas out. Once we've got into this shape, I'm going to divide the dough into 5 equal parts. It's possible to just eyeball it, but I'm also going to be using a scale to make sure they're all the same weight. Something around 82 or 83 grams. So just measuring them properly, use the scraper to cut down the pieces with too much dough. Then when we've done that, we're going to round every piece into a small ball. Let me show you how. So taking a piece, we're going to pull the edges under and seal them together so that we get a smooth side on the top and a round ball shape. We can also roll it with our palms to further round it out. Make sure not to overdo this step. We don't want to end up ripping the smooth top. Coming from the third tip, any cracks could hinder our pita bread in puffing up later, because that's where the steam is going to escape. Like a leaking balloon, it's going to have more trouble rising. So once we've got this smooth surface and circular shape, we're good. The bottom is sealed, and we want to do this for all the pieces of dough. Now they all have a good, round, even shape. We'll cover them and leave them for 30 minutes. This is a bench rest. It's just meant to let the gluten relax. After that, we want to roll out the dough with our rolling pin. We want to flatten the pitas out evenly, using some more flour to prevent sticking, not too much. Again, trying our best to not make any rips or cracks on the surface. I'm rolling them out pretty thin, a thickness of under ½ a centimeter or 1/4 of an inch. This thickness is just right for a soft pita that is sturdy enough to be stuffed or filled with whatever you'd like. You can make them a bit thicker or thinner based on your own preferences. If you'd like a sturdy and solid pita, you can make them a bit thicker, it'll have more dough on the inside, and it'll make for a denser bite. I should note though that it won't puff up as much as a thinner pita would during cooking. And if it's too thick, it won't puff up at all, so do try to avoid that. On the other hand, if you'd like a crisper, thinner bite, then you can roll the pitas out a bit thinner. They'll puff up magnificently, however, they can be difficult to stuff because of how brittle they are. It's up to what you would prefer for your pitas. Thickness decided, we now want to roll out all 5 pieces of pita. Make them as circular as we can. However, it's really okay even if some of them have a bit of a wonky shape. After all pitas are rolled out, we need to treat these discs with the utmost care so we don't rip their surface. From here, we cover the pita dough and we'll leave them for a final 20 minutes. Once the time's gone by, we can finally cook them. To use an oven, you can just crank the heat to as high as it'll go, preheat the oven well, bake the pitas for 3 to 4 minutes, and they should be done. If done right, they'll puff up all the same. I'll be using a pan here. To prepare, I'm going to coat it with a layer of olive oil, using a paper towel to spread it around and wipe off the excess. Then we want to make sure it's heated up well, as I mentioned in the 5th tip. To get the pitas to puff properly, there needs to be that burst of heat so the steam can happen. You should be able to feel the heat coming off of the pan with your hand above it. Please be very careful here. Don't accidentally burn yourself. When it's hot enough, we'll lower the heat a little and then we can put the dough into it. Place the dough into the pan top side down, so the top of the dough while it was proofing meets the pan. This is going to help our pitas have an even thickness on both sides of the pocket. Let the dough cook a little, and then flip it to prevent any burnt spots from happening. If a part of the dough burns, it could also end up leaking steam, which will definitely hamper the puffing, so keep flipping. Do this back and forth. After a couple of times, the pita will eventually fill up. If during this time, despite our previous measures, they end up leaking steam and won't inflate well, you can help them by covering the crack where the steam is escaping from. This can help them rise up more. They're basically done, but you can cook them for a bit longer to get some more crispiness or browning. A bit of charring can make them look better as well as taste better. I've actually also tried lowering the fire so they don't burn, then letting them cook for a longer while on all sides. It ends up with a very stiff and crispy pita that stays blown up even after you take it off the pan. Looks really good on camera and it's very visually attractive, but personally I prefer the softer ones. And they're done. When we remove them from the pan, they will immediately deflate, going down into that flat disc with a beautiful pocket inside. They're delicious eaten straight or with anything you'd like. And that's it for today. Thanks for watching and bye!